effect. Hopefully. The Nosferatu remake. You've heard of it. You've seen it. You love it. You hate it. Whatever. But have you seen the 1922 Nosferatu? What's that? You're not a black coffee and cigarettes. You really must see it in 35mm rolled up beanie male manipulator? Oh, well, I am. So I made my boyfriend watch the original Nosferatu with me in preparation for the new one. And I gotta say, still dope. It holds up. Look, I'm not being a delusional film bro here, okay? A quote from my boyfriend. Quote, I really liked it, and I don't give two fucks about black and white movies or old things. So real, Queen. It is so cool to see what they could accomplish with fewer resources and much further back in the course of film history. They did a great job with locations, set, costumes, cinematography. Looking back on it with a modern eye, some of it does seem a little goofy occasionally, and maybe was intended to be a little silly, like Nosferatu carrying his own coffin. But overall, it's a really beautiful and evocative film. And with the context provided by the original film, the new one excels even more than the average viewer might realize. And before I get into this, disclaimer, I should have done this video way sooner, because at this point, like, everyone and their mom has made a Nosferatu video, but just so you know, I've refrained from watching those videos to give you somewhat of an original take. So here it is. The reason this remake succeeds where others fail, or are just mid-AF, is this. The new one is more than a redux. It is truly in conversation with the original. The theming. The 1922 Nosferatu is a little less focused on symbolism and theme than the new one, mostly concerning itself with simply assembling a full 3-act narrative story on film. Using film to convey an epic gothic story like Dracula, like, this is still early on in the scheme of using film to make full feature-length stories like that, let alone executing something as grand as committing the Dracula to film. It's not the first film adaptation of a book. That honor probably falls to Cendrillon's Cinderella, adapted by Georges Méliès in 1899. But that shit's only like 6 minutes, so it does not count. So the 1922 Nosferatu is impressive just by virtue of being the best feature-length Gothic story on film at the time. Don't even come at me about other German expressionist shit, okay? I'm a Caligari stan too, but let's be real here. I guess it kind of did stick to some of the original themes of the book Dracula, but it's definitely not a faithful adaptation. Like, if we're judging Nosferatu by, is it a faithful adaptation? Like, shit is F tier. But that's not the point. The point is, the 2024 Nosferatu adds new things to the conversation theme-wise. For one, it exposes the vein of sexuality running through the original. No longer an undercurrent, it's oozing out for all to see. The original still has a little something to it, especially for the time. The 1920s melodramatic, kind of on-screen romance. They've got great chemistry. It's really awesome. And there are even some scenes between Count Orlok and Thomas Hutter that are a little fruity. I have actually already written about theming and sexuality in the original Nosferatu, so let's take a look at what College Sam has to say on this subject. I'm putting on these glasses to signify that I'm in college, because nerds wear glasses. As with every horror movie, Nosferatu is a capsule of the fears of its time, and it truly lays a plethora of such fears upon the banquet table. Homosexuality, disease, Jewishness, insanity, and the supernatural, of course. Tag yourself, I'm all of those things. Villain Count Orlok's anti-Semitic features abound. His large hooked nose, an impressive early prosthetic, his wealth, and his thirst for the blood of Gentiles. These fears have old roots. Some of the most pervasive anti-Semitic misconceptions in medieval Europe were blood libel adjacent, i.e. Jews drink Christian child blood, bake it into their matzah, etc. And those related to the supposed effeminacy of the Jewish male. The latter perception was tied to his role as passive and studious, hunched over his books all day while the masculine woman ran the house and business affairs. The blood and effeminacy associations also did converge at times, as there were even rumors of Jewish male menstruation. Besides the effeminate and degenerate Jew, the archetype of the vampire also embodies two other anti-Semitic tropes: the Jew's thirst for blood and thirst for money. It is no coincidence that these vampires are wealthy aristocrats holed up in their Gothic castles. This linkage between thirst for literal blood and a more metaphorical sense of leeching off of society is repeatedly reflected in the Gothic trope of the vampiric count or countess. The iconography of the vampire as inextricably tied to luxury, seeking gold from their victims as well as blood, is evidenced in paintings such as Burns-Jones's The Vampire, 1897. Both gold and blood are life-giving substances, mysterious manifestations of man's power. After all, Bram Dijkstra refers to gold as, quote, that cold material essence of spent seed of congealed blood. Count Orlok, aka Nosferatu, exemplifies both the greedy and the gay, as he not only lusts for Hutter's land of Germany, he's purchasing German property through Hutter, he also lusts for Hutter himself, a thirst rife with sexual overtones. When Hutter cuts himself at the breakfast table, the Count pursues him, crying out for his precious blood. As Hutter retreats, Orlok entreats him, "Can we not stay together a little while longer, my lovely man?" Emphatically rejecting this pathetic attempt at seduction, Hutter escapes with his life and runs home to his lover. So hideous is Nosferatu, his nefarious homosexual agenda is almost laughable. A departure from the frequent depiction of the dangerously seductive vampire, a la Carmilla. And College Sam's writings. So what about the updated version? How does Eggers handle these themes? Well, while the Hutter cutting his finger and Orlok consequently getting bricked up scene is a little less fruity than the old one, we do actually have something similarly homoerotic with the undulating movements of the Count while he feeds on Hutter. And in general, Nosferatu 2024, now that's a spicy meatball. It's a very sensual and sexual film, and Nosferatu New really takes the theme of forbidden sexuality and runs with it, using the vampire mythos to comment on the oppression and repression of women, more than it says anything about anti-Semitism. Eggers harkens, or should I say, harkers, back to the actual book Dracula in the way that the Harkers are treated as dual protagonists. In the Nosferatu adaptations, the couple is named the Hutters instead because #copyright. Fun fact, Bram Stoker's widow fucking sued the shit out of F.W. Murnau and won, and all the copies of Nosferatu were supposed to be fucking burned. But you know what? Here it is. Here it is today. You can't get rid of us. In the book, Mina Harker is a surprisingly complex character who acts with intelligence and agency and is instrumental in the ultimate defeat of the vampire. The new Nosferatu treats Ellen Hutter much the same. We care about her, we learn her deeper thoughts, desires, and fears, and ultimately, spoiler alert, Ellen saves the day. Though some may interpret the character as a sacrificial lamb, I think it's clear that Ellen is more of a tragic heroine, a martyr of Christ-like persuasion. Ellen is the best character in the new film, and she's way more fleshed out in this one than in the original. In fact, Eggers has said, quote, "I also wanted our version to be Ellen's story." Lily Rose Depp knocks it out of the park with this role. She brings like a sincerity and depth and a little bit of freakiness to it. Like she put her whole Nosferatu into that one. I find it really cool how the updated version of Nosferatu explores Ellen's experiences of sex and sexism. Throughout the entire film, Ellen dances on the line between the passive Victorian consumptive maiden and a dark, sensual, and unique woman. While #society tries to relegate Ellen to the seen and not heard perfect 19th century wife, she strains against this role. See the literal straining against the restraints when she's tied to the bed and when she tears her dress open during that insane sex scene. And she ultimately breaks free from that role with her tragic final act. That Friedrich motherfucker is constantly gaslighting the shit out of poor Ellen and is hella dismissive of her. But you know what? She stands up to that hoe. Towards the end, she does not take that shit lying down.
For your husband's sake, I pray you learn to conduct yourself with more deference.
Anna is going to die. You are going to die. We're all going to die.
And even her husband, who no doubt does love and support her, is blinded by his own vision of a comfortable future and forsakes her to go on this suicidal deed DoorDash to Castle Dracula. Though he says this is for us, it's clearly not, because Ellen begs him to stay, warning him of her dark premonition.
I must tell you my dream.
Ellen, we have put these difficulties behind us.
I must.
Please, no more of your childhood memories. The doctors advise never...
But no, of course, her psychic gift is completely shat on and dismissed as, like, female hysteria or whatever. That's the biggest I told you so a marriage can have, by the way. And to his credit, Hutter feels terrible about not believing her, but then he also still wants to leave her home to protect her while he goes out and slays Nosferatu. But boy, does she flip the script on his ass. She's like, yeah, honey, go be a big, strong man and kill that vampire. I'm putting my Hutter faith in you. Knowing the whole time that he is on a wild goose chase and she is going to be the one to confront the great evil. Speaking of confronting the great evil, so that's what the kids are calling it these days, let's talk about the symbolism of Nosferatu himself. The relationship between Ellen and Count Orlok is creepy and sensual and very metaphoric.
You cannot love.
I cannot. Yet I cannot be sated without you.
Orlok is a stand-in for a part of Ellen herself. He is her id, her dark urges, trauma, sexual desires, all that shit that she had to repress and shove down as a Victorian woman her whole life.
Papa found me once laying, unclothed I was. My body, my flesh, Sin, he said.
And ultimately, Ellen is able to defeat this abhorrent presence by embracing it. Literally. Nosferatu is defeated when Ellen takes ownership of her darkness and her sexuality and lays with the beast. And, oh, that final shot, it's hideous and beautiful. Just so good. Speaking of cinematography, both the old and new Nosferatu are impressive works of cinema in general, but especially in the context of their respective eras of film history and technology. Obviously today we can do a lot more with movies. Besides the more advanced tech, we also have astronomically high budgets, huge teams, and a shit ton of resources devoted to movie making nowadays. And Eggers & Co. use the full backing of modern Hollywood, including somewhere between 2,000 and 5,000 live rats, to glam up this film and make it fucking awesome and beautiful looking and sounding. The new Nosferatu is constantly in dialogue with old Nosferatu in its filmic language. Let's take a look at some parallel shots and motifs that are carried over. The first shot of the remake is a lot bolder and stronger than the first shot of the original, which is simply an establishing shot of the city. And instead of starting the story with Thomas Hutter, we start with Ellen, an appropriate choice given her place as the emotional heart of the new version. Though it is different, the opening sequence does pay homage to the original in a couple ways. First, it is so desaturated that it looks black and white, though it is likely not shot on black and white film stock. The opening sequence then goes to a shot of Ellen sleepwalking on the grounds of the manor, which reminds me both of the original Nosferatu and a bit of Murnau's other best-known film, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, with how ghostly she looks wandering the grounds. And then she starts convulsing creepily. It looks to me like it was shot on a lower frame rate than it was projected on. It's kind of reminiscent of the way that old films can look kind of jerky and sped up today because of the variable frame rate that things were shot at back in the day. And the old Nosferatu also used frame rate evocatively as well to make things look sped up and creepy. Just look at the way that they make Nosferatu's evil coach look uncanny and supernaturally fast. Alright, let's talk archways, doorways, entryways. In Nosferatu, Murnau loved framing people, particularly Thomas Hutter, using various entryways to evoke a trapped, claustrophobic vibe. And the new one also really leans into that visual language. Especially at crucial story beats, Hutter is framed in many archways and gates, bridges, etc. to signify him crossing an irreversible threshold into the domain of horror and fate. Just take a look at this shot here with like a million archways nestled like Russian dolls. It's so cool. It really pays homage to the old one while also taking it up a notch. The old one also has many iconic shots of Count Orlok being framed in arches as well, though that is less prominent in this updated version. There's another couple cool things that the new one does with the cinematography that the old one did not do. It has some interesting shots of crosses and cross motifs that are carried over into the landscape. It also has a couple different shots that make the subject look kind of like they're floating supernaturally. Moreover, there's a lot of shots where windows play an important role in both films. Especially with regard to Ellen, windows are a romantic visual signifier that she's opening herself up to Orlok. And the windows reflect light in a visually appealing and potentially symbolic way. They're a portal in which Orlok manifests when he's invited in, so to speak. Which is cool, because they're kind of like mirrors, but the opposite. And mirrors are shitty for vampires. They much prefer windows. But the mirror still has a presence in both movies. There's the mirror next to this window here. It's kind of showing the contrast between the voyeuristic, the looking out, and the self-reflective, looking inward. I guess. I don't know. I'm just making shit up. And don't even get me started on the use of shadow in both the OG and the remake. The original movie established shadows as a medium of horror and mystery. Showing Orlok's silhouette and shadow was a great, low-budget way to create suspense and visual intrigue. The new one does a similar thing with his shadow playing on curtains, walls, etc., but it increases the occult power therein by allowing the Count to have basically shadow powers, where his shadow can, like, open a door and shit. And the scene of that evil, gnarled hand shadow stretching over the city as his plague takes hold, it's fantastic. Like, please put my land in your icy grip, Orlok. And by the way, I did see it twice, and it did look way better in 35mm. Conclusion. I'm not gonna pretend to be the first bitch to say this, but remakes, reboots, spin-offs, they're killing cinema. The endless pipeline of resuscitated IPs is exhausting to cinema goers, and people have been complaining about this for like a decade. See a range of opinion articles starting in 2017 all the way up through the present day. Yes, it's an easier sell to a studio to greenlight a project with a built-in fan base, but that's not the only reason one would want to do a remake. The issue isn't necessarily remakes. It's remakes with nothing new or original to say as compared with previous iterations. It's apparent that the Nosferatu remake was a long time coming for Eggers. A personal passion project, this movie is 10 years of painstaking development and production. Eggers loved the OG Nosferatu since he was a kid, and you can see that he poured a lot of love into this movie. And I feel like Nosferatu 2024 strikes the perfect balance between paying homage to the source material and adding new layers. And that is why I think Nosferatu is the best remake of the century. I want to suck your blood or whatever.